Dudes and dudettes, how are you guys? This is Chazzy and welcome back to What's the Damage, the good old WTD question mark here on my channel. The longest running series actually on this channel. You know, my very first video ever was WTD question mark, although I did not call it that back then. But anyway, this is the segment where I get to rant and share heated and often very controversial opinions, you know, but I normally do them in a way that kind of comes off as comical in a way, but sometimes not, because I never know if I'm actually funny or not. But I got a haircut recently, so I'm looking sexy, you know, looking good for all the ladies out there who, you know, think that the Chazzy didn't look good with the Anyway, today we, or rather I, will be discussing, because you know I'm going to be discussing, you guys are just going to be watching me discuss it, you know, and maybe if you want to discuss it with me, you're going to be talking to yourself on your phone there looking stupid, you know, but I'm going to be discussing this very threadbare concept of photography and how, in my opinion, it is becoming much more artificial, you know, throughout the years. And I have already covered this topic before, literally the same exact video, shot for shot remake, and I'm even wearing the same shirt, you know, my very fancy long sleeve shirt, even though it's not that cold right now. I look like a freaking blue collar office worker. I look like I work in a cubicle. But anyway, so now here's the thing, guys, just like the first time that I covered it, but giving a little bit more detail, in case you don't know, I actually am a photographer outside of YouTube, you know. I haven't actually had any jobs in a while because I sort of kind of, you know, fell out of love with it for a while, but I am trying to come back, you know. You can actually follow me on Instagram and take a look at my work. You know, I've been trying to post photos again this year in 2023. The link to it will be in the description of this video. I don't know if you guys ever check the descriptions of my videos, but always make sure you do, because I leave links to other social networks of mine. You know, you can go on my channel and see a link to it there, but that's not the point. So the thing is that I have been working with photography for many years. You know, I actually kind of fell in love with it, began to develop an interest in like around 2014, 2015, and since then it's been quite a harrowing journey of different photo shoots and stuff, you know. And I am the kind of person who believes that photography is a very philosophical art, you know. It was created for us to register moments that happen in real time, so kind of like freeze a moment in time and have that moment there preserved forever, so we can always look back on that photo and remember what it was like on that day, you know, and we can use it to tell a story, because every single photo tells a story, you know. So imagine how many stories you could tell with 1,000 photos, you know. Imagine having like a library of photos instead of books, you know. So I have a very passionate and philosophical approach to photography. So I believe that when you take a moment in time, you have the responsibility to preserve it as best as you can, to tell a story later on for different generations of how things were back then, you know. And photography has evolved a lot over the years, you know, and it dates way back to the 1800s, you know, when the early to mid and late 1800s it started to kind of gain traction, you know. The very first photograph ever was registered in 1826 in France. Yes, there was photography even back then. The photo has come to become known as View from the Window at Le Gras. I don't speak French, you know, but it is actually still preserved today. It's the oldest surviving camera photograph. The original looks crappy, but there were attempts at restoring it many times, you know. Throughout the 1800s, there were different pieces of technology introduced, like the camera obscura, which would essentially invert an image, you know, to reflect the light back and basically give you an image, you know. Then there was the daguerreotype, you know. It just kept going on and on. In the 1900s, it really expanded much more to include different kinds of actual handheld cameras, you know, which were actually much bigger than they should have been, but still, the point is that, you know, as the years went by, photography started to become a much more mainstream thing, you know. And then in 1990, along came something called Adobe Photoshop, and that's kind of like the main crust of what I'm going to be talking about today. I have a bone to pick with photographers who use Photoshop and excessive, you know, because there is a variation of it called Adobe Photoshop Lightroom, which is a way for you to kind of make your photos look a little better and pop out more. But Lightroom, in my opinion, is different than Photoshop, because in Lightroom you're just messing around with the tones and color palettes to make the photo pop a little more. That's fine, but with Photoshop it's different, you know. It's an opportunity for you to completely manipulate the photo in a way that's gonna look better to you, and I really don't like it when people do this. You know, photographers who do this lose a lot of my respect, which I will explain as the video goes on. But just to illustrate the point a little bit better, I'm gonna show you guys something here, and you're going to later on draw your own conclusions. Take a look at 4 raw, unedited stock photos of random places around the world, you know, and you're going to understand this in just a few more minutes, you know. But take a look at these photos here. Really memorize what they look like, you know, just let them soak into your brain right now. 4 completely unaltered photos, just directly from Google Images. Now make sure you took a good look at those photos, go back and rewind and look at them again, whatever makes you, really ingrain them, into your brain. I don't want you to forget those photos because it's going to be important in just a minute. Now, here's the thing. I really do not respect people who use Photoshop too much. Now let me explain here before you call me a hypocrite. I use Photoshop obviously to make my thumbnails on YouTube. That is completely different. I am creating something that is meant to be seen as entertainment. I am trying to entice viewers to watch my content, and I'm creating something that is entirely fictional and does not exist in real life. Like when I Photoshop my avatar into a game wallpaper to show you guys a gameplay, that's different. What I don't like are people who use it to manipulate reality itself. There are people who are addicted to Photoshop, and because it's available in 26 different languages, I can understand that it's probably used in many parts of the world, and I've seen it used excessively here in Brazil as well. People with very low self-esteem are constantly editing their own photos on Photoshop to give them facelifts or make them lose weight or make their faces look better, their makeup. This is very sad and pathetic, man. Like whenever you use Photoshop to make yourself look good and it elevates your self-esteem, that's actually very sad, because it shows that you are so unhappy with your appearance in real life that you have to resort to internet trickery, let's say, technological frauding to make yourself look better. And many people use this to catfish others on social media online. So sometimes a person will Photoshop their faces or even their bodies to a point where they don't even look like themselves anymore. I've actually been a victim of this once working with photography. I wanted to go on a photo shoot with this model whose photo I saw on Instagram. Actually, I think it was Instagram or Facebook. The point is that I saw it in this modeling agency and I thought she was beautiful, Then I finally met her in real life to do the photos, and she was the exact opposite, So it's not like here's the thing. I have a theory that anybody can be photographed. You don't necessarily have to be a supermodel who's very thin, and has a perfectly curved face and beautiful hair. Anybody can be a model. Photography is about registering moments in time, not necessarily Barbies, but because the person looked a certain way and then she looked completely different in real life, I was very uncomfortable throughout the entire photo shoot. She was a little shorter and a bit stockier, her face was different. It was very uncomfortable, but I've never said anything, but it's the kind of thing that happens a lot because people are just so overly reliant on Photoshop to do their needs, in photos. Now, when you're supposedly a photographer who makes a living, selling photos or otherwise profiting off of your work as a photographer in any form, shape, or manner, and you use Photoshop to manipulate the photo in a different way, you are not a photographer. You are simply a Photoshopper. That's what you are. Photoshop has become a verb, like for example, you can say to Photoshop a photo, it is a real thing. So now I have seen things on Instagram and Twitter. I've even had arguments with photographers on Twitter, where it's like they feel the need to go to a place and take a photo, but if the weather, for example, doesn't look the way they want to, then they're gonna use Photoshop to make it look better, Like if the weather sucks, there's not a cloud in sight, they're gonna go on Photoshop to add the clouds. Go screw yourself, man. You're lying to people. When you were there that day and you took that photo, there was not a cloud in sight. So if you take a cloud or a series of clouds and add it in Photoshop, you're lying to your audience. Your photography is about registering a moment in time that actually happened, not manipulating it to make it so it looked different than it actually happened. You can't just take a photo and add something that wasn't there that day and post it on Instagram and expect people to take you seriously, even though many do, because a lot of people aren't the way that I am, I have definitely been fooled by others, I actually respect the photographers who work with this and they let you know that they are photoshopping their images. There are photographers who make a very good living, they have a large following on social media like on Instagram or YouTube or even Twitter, where their entire work is based around creating Photoshop images. That's fine, that's cool, because they even show you the behind the scenes process of how they put the photos together, and that is awesome. It's somebody who is, they are intentionally creating fictionalized versions of a certain photo, and that's awesome. But the ones who do it and try to pass it off as real, or just come out and say, well, the photo, the day that I visited Italy or Spain or France, the weather sucks, so I made the sky look a little brighter and put in clouds and stuff. You're lying to people, and I hate you. Just to illustrate my point a little bit better now, remember those photos that I showed you some time ago, those 4 photos? Remember what they look like? Well, here are those same exact photos edited in Photoshop. Ansel Adams probably just rolled in his grave twice after seeing that, man, because holy freaking crap, I'm so sorry that I had to, just freaking perform such egregious surgery on 4 beautiful photos, but it's just to show the point. Yes, I edited those myself, and it's just to illustrate the point. Do you see how much they changed? Did they look better? I mean, that's up to you. It's up to you might think they look worse, but the point is that they're different. I manipulated those images just to prove a point here, like, I mean, it's just so crazy because Ansel Adams was like possibly one of, if not the best landscape photographer of all time, even though his work was primarily with black and white and all of the American West, and I'm not a really big fan of that, but I do respect his work a lot. The guy created so many different techniques for like sharp focus and the tonal range of photos and different kinds of developments, positive and negative exposure printing, He was even given the damn Presidential Medal of Freedom in 1980 for his work in photography, And today it's a bunch of freaking hooligans editing photos, It's just freaking, I hate it so much, man, because when you're a photographer, you have the obligation of freezing a moment in time and letting the photo speak for itself, Now, editing a photo can be different, like, because I think that editing and manipulating are a little different, because usually editing is like in Photoshop, where you add things that weren't there before to make it look much more surreal, whereas it's the opposite. Manipulating is that in Photoshop, where you add things to it that weren't there to manipulate the appearance, whereas editing can be like in Lightroom or Vasco, VSCO, or whatever, where you just mess with the tones. I do this myself, I never ever use a raw photo. I do like to add a little bit of coloring and tones, but you're not really manipulating the photo, you're just manipulating a little bit of the textures and lighting, to make it just pop a little more. That's perfectly fine, man, That's why I love photographers who are masters of Adobe Lightroom. So it's really crazy. Like, it's okay for you to mess with the contrast and the exposure here and there, You're just trying to make the photo pop more, but you are, like, in general, preserving it. There's a photographer named Alex Stroh who I followed on Instagram for many years and admired because his photos are very, very, very subtly manipulated, so he doesn't really escape too much from the original piece of work that he himself took with the camera. So I love that so much. But when you add something that wasn't there, you are very clearly and blatantly lying. You're telling a story that's false. You're fabricating a non-existent tale. It's like you go to the Caribbean, and you're expecting clear blue skies, but it's actually cloudy. Then you take a photo, go on Photoshop, and you put in that clear blue sky that you want. Then you post that photo to Facebook and say, hey, look guys, I went on vacation in the Caribbean and the sky was so clear. It wasn't. It wasn't. How do you feel good lying to your public like this? It's freaking crazy. I just can't stand it, and that's why I have such a strong bone to pick with people who do this. Photography has become so artificial. I can barely use Instagram anymore because there are so many heavily edited images, and now they're posting a bunch of videos and reels and stuff. It's just not the Instagram that I fell in love with, and that's why it's so hard for me to want to go back to post photos. It's just egregious, and I hate it so much. So I tried to come back to photography. I did a photo shoot last year with this pretty girl that lives here in town, and we took the photos. It was nice. I recorded a travel vlog, but I just can't get into it anymore. It's just like the art of photography has become so artificial and fake that there doesn't seem to be any passion anymore, Nobody wants to legitimately tell stories the way that it was intended to be. So it's really, really sad, and somebody like me who really did have a well-paying job some years ago, working as a freelance photographer and doing a lot of different works. It just, I'm a teacher today. I do teach photography, so I kind of try to instill these insights in the next generation. I try to, encourage my students to stay away from the manipulation, but it's really hard because that's just what this generation is. Photography has come so far since back in the day, and at the same time I feel like it's just, it's not even photography anymore. It's really sad, It is really, really sad. It's just, I think that people today are just it's gonna get to a point where people manipulate their photos so heavily in Photoshop that they're not even gonna remember what the actual real memory was, Like, photos are supposed to be tied to memories, usually happy, hopefully happy and pleasant memories. And when you go in Photoshop and you keep mixing things up and putting things there that weren't there, that memory can actually become distorted. Like, maybe as the years go by, you might even not remember how the day was because you manipulated so many images, which is very sad. And it all goes back to people who with low self-esteem constantly manipulating themselves in Photoshop. You know, it does eventually lead to a lot of plastic surgeries, you know, and eventually it's gonna get to a point where it's crazy, man, you know, because there is such thing as Photoshop in real life. It's called plastic surgery, and people get to the point where they do so much surgery that they don't even look like themselves anymore. So it's the same thing, you know. It's just like, it's a snowball effect. It keeps getting bigger and bigger and worse and more dangerous as it just keeps going, you know. So there is a way for you to control it. Just stop, you know. Like if you're a photographer who constantly feels the need to manipulate your photos in Photoshop, you have lost all of my respect immediately. You will lose, sorry, let me rephrase that. You will lose all of my respect immediately, you know. I don't admire you. I don't admire your work. I don't feel like you are an inspiration to anybody, even more so myself, you know. So it's kind of weird. Sometimes I think I flirt with the idea of going back to photography in some concept, you know. But I think at this point I'll probably serve better as a motivational speaker than an actual photographer himself, because nobody is gonna like my photos given how they're so little. How can I say it? They are so, I don't know. They're barely edited in a certain context, you know. So very sad. I don't like it, but that's just how people choose to live their lives, you know, their work. So yeah, man, it's not that I have anything like, it's like you can do it. It's not illegal. You can do whatever the hell you want in Photoshop, but I just think it's dumb and wrong, and I just think you're a bunch of idiots, you know. And hopefully one day the world will stop falling for your bull crap. But anyway, guys, let me know in the comments below what you feel about this, you know, what you think, if you thought this video was interesting. I'm sorry if I'm not very enthused here towards the end. It's because I get in a really bad mood when I talk about this. You know, I'm so in love with photography, and I hate it when this happens. My stomach is rumbling, by the way. I'm freaking hungry as hell. I gotta go eat. But anyway, let me know in the comments below what you think about this. And if you happen to like this video, please go ahead and give it a like, and also subscribe to my channel, because I release videos every single day. And while you're at it, hit the notification bell too, so I can know exactly what time I upload, and it's all good. Go ahead and check out my Instagram later if you want to see my photos, or go on my channel and go to my Chazzy Travels Expedition Chazzy playlist to see my many different photo shoots, you know, that I record videos of, you know, travel vlogs. It's a lot of fun. And that's it, guys. This is Chazzy signing out for now, and as always, I will see you guys in the next video. Stupid fly, go away. Roll the outro screen. Go away, you stupid freaking fly. God damn it.